The summer heat shimmered over the cul-de-sac like invisible waves when it all started. A Saturday so unremarkable it could have faded into memory unnoticed if not for what happened next. "Put your hands behind your back," barked a voice with all the intensity of someone who watched way too many police dramas. That voice belonged to Ron Harper, middle-aged man with a paunch, khaki cargo shorts, and an unearned sense of authority. He wasn't a cop, not even close. But he had an embroidered polo that read Community Enforcer, a laminated badge from a novelty store, and the kind of self-importance that filled the air like smog. Across from him stood 14-year-old Nate Nephew. Skinny, awkward, clever kid who had just landed a basic kickflip in the driveway. His skateboard coasted lazily to a stop beside his sneaker as he blinked up at Ron. "Are you serious?" Nate asked, a mix of disbelief and amusement tugging at his voice. Ron didn't blink. "Dead serious. You're in violation of Community Noise Code 14.7 and possibly inciting property risk." He held up a pair of plastic zip ties like a magician producing his next trick. "You're being detained." Before I could even get across the lawn, Ron spun Nate around and zip-tied his wrists like he was the star of a low-budget cop show no one had asked for. I dropped the slice of pizza I'd been holding. "Are you out of your damn mind?" Ron glanced at me like I just insulted his mother. "Sir, do not interfere. I'm conducting official HOA enforcement." "You're not a cop," I snapped. "This is my sister's driveway. Her house. You can't do this." "I'm HOA certified," Ron said smugly, as if that phrase had ever meant anything. "You're lucky I don't cite you for obstruction." I pulled out my phone and called my sister. It rang twice before going to voicemail. Typical. She was probably still on some assignment. What I didn't know was that Claremy's sister had just stepped off a helicopter from a 3-state FBI operation. She called back 4 minutes later, voice low and controlled. "I'll be there in 5. She was. 5 minutes after that call, a black SUV rolled silently up the street. No sirens, no lights, just presence. Out stepped Claire, still in field gear, tactical boots, utility belt, windbreaker with that unmistakable badge clipped at the hip. She scanned the scene, her son zip-tied on the driveway, a man with delusions of authority standing over him. And that's when all hell broke loose. Claire didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "Let him go," she said, her voice calm as glacier ice. Ron blinked. "And who are you exactly?" She stepped closer, flipped her badge open inches from his face. "Special Agent Claire Foster. FBI." You could hear the collective inhale from the gathering neighbors, some of whom had pulled out phones to record. Ron's mouth opened and closed like a fish yanked from a tank. "Your badge is real?" "Very unlike yours," Claire replied. Then she snapped a photo of his ridiculous plastic badge and said, "You've just committed unlawful detainment of a minor, impersonated law enforcement, and potentially violated multiple civil liberties." Ron fumbled for the zip ties like they were burning his fingers. "Too late for that," she added. "I've already called local PD. You might want to stick around." Ron looked around, panicked. The neighbors weren't on his side. They had their phones trained on him like paparazzi chasing a scandal. Nate sat up, rubbing his wrists, grinning. "You messed with the wrong kid." Ron knew it. By the time the police showed up, Ron was sweating through his community patrol polo. 2 young but serious officers stepped out of the cruiser and took one look at Nate's red wrists, Claire's badge, and the plastic cuffs on the ground. They didn't need a warrant to start asking questions. "ID," one of the officers said, and Ron handed over a homemade HOA enforcement card with a poorly drawn eagle holding a mailbox. The other officer suppressed a laugh. Ron claimed he was acting on behalf of the HOA's Special Response Team, a phrase that made the cops exchange glances. Claire crossed her arms. "There is no Special Response Team," she said. "Not unless your HOA's been training mall cops in secret boot camps." The officers separated Ron from the crowd and took his statement. Meanwhile, Nate sat in the back of Claire's SUV sipping a juice box like he'd just won a trophy. That night, Claire got to work. She wasn't just mad. She was on a mission. We logged into the neighborhood app and found post after post, neighbors describing strange citations, trash bins being moved, mysterious warnings about property standards. Most people thought it was some overzealous volunteer. A few had even thanked him. But Claire saw the pattern. Ron was targeting newcomers, renters, families who didn't play by the HOA's invisible rules. She called a friend in local law enforcement. Within an hour, we had confirmation Ron was not on the HOA board. Not now. Not ever. He had no legal authority. No patrol rights. Zip. Nada. So how had he been allowed to run unchecked? The answer came via an anonymous message on the app from a user named Beacon Hill 78. He's not alone, it said. Ask about the handshake deal. That next morning, Claire went to the HOA officia fluorescent-lit room that smelled like old paper and sadness. She asked for the board president. Gary McNally. Golf tan. Weak handshake. Nervous eyes. Agent Foster, he said, forcing a smile. What brings the FBI to our little slice of heaven? Claire didn't play nice. Ron Harper. Your so-called enforcer. Gary chuckled. Ron's just an enthusiastic resident. Maybe he got a little carried away. He zip-tied a child. On private property. Wearing a fake badge. The smile vanished. Claire leaned in. Did you authorize him to monitor the neighborhood? No, Gary said too quickly. Well, not officially. I mean, some of the board thought it might be helpful or were complaints. Unofficial surveillance? Gary's face dropped. Claire stood, eyes locked on his. You better hope those cameras weren't yours. They were. By that night, we had footage from 3 neighbors' hidden cameras inside birdhouses, blinking devices on fences, motion sensors on light poles. Claire called in a favor. A mobile tech unit arrived in a plain van and swept the street. They found 8 devices, all feeding into a hard drive in Ron's garage. When the police arrived with a warrant, they found more than they expected. Maps, schedules, car plates, photos, files labeled with last names, our last name included. Ron had built a dossier on half the neighborhood. That night, someone posted a photo of the FBI van on the neighborhood app. The caption read, "Turns out the fake HOA cop was running a suburban spy ring. You won't believe what he had on us." It exploded. People from nearby communities chimed in with their own horror stories. The next morning, Ron was arrested. Charges: impersonating law enforcement, illegal detainment, unlawful surveillance, wire fraud. But Claire wasn't done. She traced the approval chain and found more email zones from Sandra Wilkes, the HOA treasurer. Polite in public, clipboard queen, always present after Ron issued a citation. She'd approved reimbursements, helped fabricate fake bylaws, and erased digital trails. Claire brought everything together in one meeting. The HOA Truth Session. Held in the community center gym, it was standing room only. Families brought snacks. Teens brought memes. Someone pinned Ron's citations to a corkboard like an exhibit. Claire laid it all out: photos, maps, surveillance blueprints. The crowd gasped. Then they asked questions. Could they get refunds? Were their fines legal? Who else was involved? Claire answered what she could. By week's end, 90% of the community signed a petition to dissolve the current HOA board. Gary resigned. Sandra didn't. 3 days later, federal agents searched her home. They found the emails, the reimbursement trails. One even read, "Let Ron handle it. He scares the troublemakers." Sandra was arrested, charged with conspiracy, obstruction, and aiding unlawful surveillance. Ron? Things got worse. Investigators found fake invoices totaling over $15,000. And one camera feed had accidentally recorded a local contractor dumping chemicals into a storm drain. Ron's fantasy of power had uncovered a real crime. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Nate, meanwhile, became something of a local legend. He was invited to speak at a school event on youth rights. He and Claire recorded a PSA called "Know Your Rights When Authority Isn't Real." It went viral. The neighborhood transformed. People talked more, played more, shared more. A golden retriever named Judge was made honorary HOA president. His only policy: belly rubs on Thursdays. On the anniversary of Ron's downfall, the community held a block party. There was food, music, a dunk tank. The target? A cardboard cutout of Ron in his fake uniform. Nate hit it 3 times in a row. Claire laughed so hard she had to sit down. Weeks later, Claire got a letter, official seal, big title. The Bureau offered her a new role: Director of Community Oversight, a national task force on impersonated authority and surveillance abuse. She stared out the window at Nate skating again, unbothered. "Maybe," she said, "but only if I can work from here." She took the job. And the first line of the training manual she wrote? If the guy in khakis with a plastic badge tells you to get on the ground, ask to see a real one. Because sometimes the best justice isn't just serve it, it's lived. Celebrate it, protect it, and never ever zip tied again.